Did you know? The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask actually has voice commands programmed into the game, and they still work. On March 1st, 2018, Nintendo 64 ROM hacker Zoinkity found voice commands programmed into the original Japanese release of the game. Just a day later, Zoinkity discovered the voice commands were programmed into all versions of Majora's Mask, including the GameCube re-releases. For years it was known that Majora's Mask's debug menu mentioned support for the voice recognition system add-on, but there'd been no proof the game ever actually used it until now. It appears a single byte of data is the only thing stopping the VRS from working. Once changed in the ROM, commands can be spoken into the voice recognition system just as they can in Hey You Pikachu. The commands are in Japanese in all versions. Okiro, Japanese for wake up, can be used to wake up Deku Scrubs. Ato Nanjikan, or how many hours left, can be asked of the Sheikah stones to tell the player the time. Then there's milk, which allows the player to gather twice as much milk from cows. Of course, this isn't the only secret surrounding the game. The game's original director, Eiji Aonuma, actually wasn't looking forward to remaking the game for the 3DS. Aonuma said, "It was one of those games where I was able to do quite a bit because I was much younger, so I didn't want to open that lid again." When Aonuma finally reopened the lid, he found decision after decision that made him think, what in the world? In fact, there were so many questionable decisions that Aonuma ended up making a what in the world list of features that needed to be tweaked or changed. When he gave the list to the 3DS design team, it was filled with confession-style apologies. One read, "At the time, I think there was something wrong with me." It's probably good that some ideas from Aonuma's younger days didn't make it into Majora's Mask. One idea considered was that Link would mark his hand to reflect the balance in his bank account. Aonuma recalled, "Maybe you could only see them if you shone a black light on them." This would sort of make sense in that he goes back in time but stays who he is. He retains everything that is part of his person. You could just look at your hand and say, "Oh yes, you were this person with this account and this is your balance." But the team realized there'd be some paradoxical issue no matter their approach. Ocarina of Time also had many obscure features that were changed before the final release. In 1997, Miyamoto was interviewed by Japan's Famemaga 64 magazine and revealed several details about Ocarina of Time that were different to the final game. Originally, Link would have had his speed slowed down as his health depleted. Only adult Link would have been able to use magic. Link would have been able to use staves as weapons. And Link would have been able to dash by pressing the B button when the game prompted it. The 3 spiritual stones were also intended to slot into the ocarina, which had 3 holes for this purpose. Miyamoto even said Shadow Link wouldn't be in Ocarina of Time, as it was a last-minute addition to Zelda 2. He also suggested that there'd be multiple horseback enemies, but the only enemy who rides a horse in the final game is Phantom Ganon. Yet one feature was always intended to make it in, the demon roosters. Miyamoto said, "We created this rooster so realistically, it's scary. He follows along just like a stalker. It would be bad if you bullied it." The Gerudo Fortress isn't accessible to Link when he's a child. However, an extra piece of heart can be found above Link's cell while in child form, and can only be obtained via cheats or glitches. The treasure chest that contains a piece of heart for adult Link instead holds an odd mushroom during the child era. Both of these discoveries imply that the fortress was originally explorable by child Link, and these objects can even still be found in the 3DS remake of the game. There's also unused files on Ocarina of Time's bonus disc, which was a pre-order bonus for the Wind Waker. The disc contains files alluding to The Legend of Zelda X, along with a logo for the title. Many believe that this was the bonus disc's original title. Twilight Princess went in a different direction to Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. Rather than having details left out of the final game, details went into the game that are obsolete or difficult for a player to notice. For example, in most Zelda games, signposts can be chopped up with your sword. In Twilight Princess, the wooden pieces left over are programmed to float in water. What makes this detail interesting is that in the final game, there are no signposts located directly next to rivers, so to find it, players need to move the pieces to the river themselves. The feature took some time to implement, with Miyamoto jokingly saying, "This feature took us about the same time as it did to work on just one of the horses." Among Nintendo's staff, Miyamoto is known to upend the tea table, meaning he demands large changes to a game towards the end of development. Aya Kyogoku, who was in charge for the overall script and some events for Twilight Princess, said players originally only spent 1 day in Ordon Village, the first location of the game. Kyogoku said, "Out of the blue, it was decided to make it 3 days. We got a sheet of paper with a specification plan written on it, a kind of Miyamoto-san's 3-day plan." According to Kyogoku, the team received the paper late in development, right after E3. The reason seemed to boil down to the Wii version of Twilight Princess not giving players much time to adapt to the radically new control scheme. If players only spent a small amount of time there before heading to more difficult parts, they might feel unprepared and get frustrated. Still, the effect of the decision was abrupt and intense. Programming, positions of characters, field design, all of the lines spoken by characters, and even several items in the village were altered. Kyogoku had to tell the European and American localization teams that the village was going to be completely changed, and not to translate anything before the changes were finished. But then, right when the team was finishing up, the tea table was upended again when it was decided to put another event into the game's story. Despite this, the team managed to get everything finished in time for release, including the localization staff. While the localizations for Breath of the Wild are largely the same between the Japanese and English versions of the game, some interesting changes were made. One difference is that the English localization team appears to have changed the motivation behind Ganon transforming into his Dark Beast form. In the English localization, it stated, "He has given up on reincarnation and assumed his pure, enraged form." This appears to directly contradict the Japanese version, which says, "This form was born from his obsessive refusal to give up on revival." This wasn't the only interesting difference. One change was made to the book The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Creating a Champion. In the Japanese version of the book, concept art of Link's family can be found in a transition page between book sections. This art shows Link's father, who is stated to be a knight in the game, and his sister. The English version of the book replaces this photo with a map, effectively region locking the art. There's another hint to Link's origins in Creating a Champion that may confirm a long-standing fan theory. In the entry for Hateno Village, it says Link's hometown may have been Hateno Village. The image accompanying the entry seems to imply that the vacant house for sale in the village once belonged to Link and his family. Of course, for a game as large as Breath of the Wild, there are many unused ideas. One of these appeared at the Game Developers Conference in 2017. There, several Breath of the Wild developers gave a presentation about breaking the conventions of the Zelda franchise. One of the unused pieces of concept art showed off depicted a floating island with Ganondorf standing atop of it. Though it never appeared in Breath of the Wild, this idea might not go unused after all. In the trailer for Breath of the Wild's sequel, a clip shows part of the land, Hyrule Castle included, breaking off from the earth and rising into the sky. Another unused idea for the Zelda series comes from Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario. Martinet once asked Shigeru Miyamoto whether he could also be the voice of Link. Miyamoto reportedly responded, "Link isn't going to have a voice, he's going to stay the way he is." If Martinet was disappointed, he didn't show it, saying, "Of course, Mr. Miyamoto is always right. The way it works right now is the way it's supposed to be." Speaking of voice work, both Zelda the Wand of Gamelon and Link the Faces of Evil for the Philips CDI have unused audio warnings. The protagonists of both games will warn the player that the game disc might be dirty, and recommend cleaning it before continuing.
"I think your game disc must be dirty. Try ending the game and cleaning your disc."
Fans of Nintendo might be aware of the iQ Player. It was a Chinese exclusive console that essentially existed as an alternative to the Nintendo 64 and used comparative hardware. Well, the iQue Player was finally cracked in April 2018, a full 15 years after its release. Inside, hackers discovered a never-before-seen Taiwanese ROM of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. This suggests that the iQue Player, and possibly also Ocarina of Time, were originally planned to be localized and released in the region. There's only so much localization teams can do to smooth over differences between cultures, and one character in the Zelda series has always been divisive: Tingle. Japanese audiences love him, which led to him getting his own Japanese exclusive spin-off game, freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. This information isn't very new. What is, however, is that according to Nintendo's Kensuke Tanabe, a game was once in the works that was more aligned with how Westerners view Tingle. In 2010, a horror game starring Tingle began development under Vanpool, the same team that made Rosy Rupee Land. Not much is known about the game and what it would have been. It was reportedly cancelled for, quote, a variety of reasons. Did you also know that during the Horde battle at the end of Skyward Sword, the Bokoblin's horns changed their sound to the very same tune played by A Link to the Past's flute? For more facts, check out my video on Skyward Sword Easter eggs and references.